Now, questions, we're going to have people meandering up and down the center and on the outsides of the aisles to give everybody a chance to turn in any audience questions. Tyler McDermott, I want to thank him for being here. He's going to be our moderator. Is Soul here? Oh, there's Hi, Soul. I also want to really thank our three candidates. Adam Frisch, Soul Sandoval, and Alex Walker. The candidates will have 3 minutes at the beginning of the forum to introduce themselves and talk to some of their issues that they're most concerned about. I want to say welcome. This is great. We are so lucky to have these folks here tonight, and it's important for us. It's important for us as a party and as a county to get this great turnout that we've had, because we want the candidates to come back. We want them to know that we're out here. We know that we're interested, and this is a great showing tonight. I'm going to introduce our local candidates tonight real briefly. No long introductions, but I'm going to ask them to stand and please hold your applause till the end. The first candidate that I'm going to ask to stand up is going to be Dave Stalky. He's running for Senate District 7. Then we have Alice Marie Slavin Even. David Davis. David Davis running for House District 55. Charlie Pink. Charlie's Jeff Walden. Jeff's running for clerk and recorder. And Megan Johnson. There's Megan in the back. Megan's running for coroner. So we've got a very good set of candidates locally this year. You guys can go ahead and take a seat. Thank you. So I'm gonna say something that I hadn't planned on saying. Normally I try to start something like this out with a little bit of humor, just to get the place settled down and to be kind of started out in a happy mood. Well, I'm not in a happy mood. I'm in an angry mood. I'm in a disheartened mood. And I think that we all know why. I think we're all angry tonight. We have got to stop killing our kids.
Kids killing everybody.
We've got to stop killing people in supermarkets and schools. We've got to stop it. Now, tonight we're not going to really push it, but in my role with the party, we're going to start pushing. We're going to get angry. Okay, a few rundown on some expectations for you guys. First of all, now that we've applauded and gotten that out of our system, we're going to hold any applause and demonstrations till the end of the forum. We're going to try and get about 10 questions in tonight. It takes a while for all three candidates to have their chance to speak. So we're going to make sure.
Good evening, and welcome to this evening's candidate forum for the Democratic candidates seeking to represent the 3rd Congressional District. My name is Tyler McDermott, and I'm a native to the Western Slope and longtime political campaign worker who has worked on campaigns of all sizes, from school board to city council to U.S. Congress and President, both here in Mesa County as well as across the rest of the state. Today I am serving as moderator on behalf of the Mesa County Democratic Party and would like to thank them for the opportunity and all of you for being here today. I would also like to thank Colorado Mesa University for hosting this event and allowing us to utilize their space. This forum is part of an effort to help voters make informed decisions at the upcoming Democratic primary elections for the 3rd Congressional District taking place on June 28th. And we hope that over the course of this program, you will learn more about the candidates and what they hope to do as your next representative and congressperson from the 3rd Congressional District of Colorado. I'm going to start by explaining some procedures for the forum. Some of these Charlie has already covered, but I will reiterate them. And so we're going to start with some instructions for the candidates. You will each have 3 minutes for an opening statement, 3 minutes for a closing statement, and 2 minutes to answer each question. Candidates should refrain from attacking one another. And this is not a debate, this is a forum. And so if a candidate is, however, brought up in another candidate's answer, I will give that person who was brought up 30 seconds to respond as a rebuttal. However, please refrain. Opening and closing statements will be done in alphabetical order, first forwards, then backwards. 4 questions have been submitted and chosen ahead of time, and we will select a number of questions that you all have the opportunity to submit today with the index cards that you were given. And I'm going to rotate who goes first for each question. And for the first question, we're going to begin with Saul Sandoval, as she will not have the opportunity to go first in opening or closing statements. I will repeat questions when asked. Otherwise, I will only read the question at the top of the 3 candidates' opportunities to answer. Please ask me to repeat the question if you require that. The timekeeper is sitting right here in the front row and is going to have this computer screen that you can all see. That is going to have the amount of time that you have remaining in your answer. We also have some cards that we're going to hold up. If you wouldn't mind giving us an example. We have a 30-second card to let you know you have 30 seconds remaining. We have a 15-second card. And then we have a stop sign. When you see that stop sign, please finish your thought. No run-on sentences, don't keep adding commas to the sentence. We're just going to end it as fast as you can. And please do that in order to be respectful to both the audience and your fellow candidates. And so now, again, I'm just going to reiterate some instructions for the audience so that way we can publicly shame anyone whose phone goes off. So please silence your phones and leaving watches now. We request that you treat all the candidates fairly and be respectful. Remain quiet throughout the forum. Again, no clapping or cheering until the end of the closing statements. And at that point, you can all clap for all of the candidates. In fact, I encourage you to. And again, no campaign literature or signs waving. We want everyone to be able to see the entire time. And please do submit your questions. I look forward to reading some of the questions that you all submit. So, let's get started. We are going to begin with the opening statements, and we will start with Adam Frisch. You now have 3 minutes.
Tyler, thank you very much, and Charlie, thank you, and to Maria and Scott and the rest of the troops. All of us candidates get some accolades for being up here and running, but it's really the grounding that matters in these races, especially now. I'm going to spend my name is Adam Frisch. I am running for CD3 to make sure that Lauren Boebert gets her dream job as soon as possible. That's getting her on Fox News as soon as possible on a permanent basis, and that's going to happen in January. And I'm going to make sure that happens. I'm running as a father and a businessman and a local community activist and former city council person. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some inspirational facts about strategy. There is a path to victory, and that's the main thing I want to get across to everyone that I share as I go around. While Marjorie Taylor Greene won 75% of her vote last time, and Matt Gaetz won 65%, and Madison Cawthorn won 55%, Lauren Boebert only won 51% of the vote. She did not win her home county of Rifle and Silt, Garfield County. She is weak. Do not think that loud and embarrassing is strong, nor kind and thoughtful and passionate is weak. And I think that's a message that I want to get across to everybody. She is weak and she's going to lose, and that's something that everyone should repeat 20 or 30 times before they go to bed. The math says that the district is 25% Democratic, 31 Republican, and 43% unaffiliated. So us Ds cannot do this by ourselves. It's important, it's mandatory that there's some type of coalition that's built beyond just the traditional Democratic voters. I think Don Corn was going to flush out 30 or 40% of the disenfranchised Republican vote, and my plan is to earn a fourth or fifth of that. We need less than 10% of our prior voters to go along with what Diane and Gail have got in the past. And there is a path to victory. This is going to be the emotional win for the country, and I really want to make that case now. I'll get into some of the background throughout the questions, but I spent my first 5 years on an Indian reservation in northeastern Montana. My parents moved out there. My father worked in the public health service, and my mom did start working in social work. He spent 50 years being an OBGYN, and his last 5 years, he worked with Planned Parenthood in Phoenix, Arizona, to make sure the next generation of Planned Parenthood caregivers were looked after. So that horrible news that came out a couple Tuesdays ago is really relevant to me as someone whose father came home and shared the stories of bomb threats at the office and picketers outside our house. So more about me as we go into the conversation, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm excited with a heavy heart.
Thank you. Sol?
Buenas tardes, Grand Junction. I am Sol Sandoval, and first and foremost, Tiger, it's nice to see you in person outside of Zoom. Thank you, everyone who made today possible. Thank you all for attending today. So, first and foremost, I want you all to know that I didn't sleep very well last night. I dropped off my children at a public school. They both attend a public elementary, and I prayed that they would have a safe school day. So I need you to know that I am lacking sleep because I couldn't sleep very well last night. As a matter of fact, on the way here, I spoke with a member of my team, Erica, who shared with me that she had a conversation with her child about how to behave if she were to be involved in a shooting at her school. So I need you to know that I am lacking sleep. I did consume extra caffeine to make up for it. So if you see me shaking a little bit, thank you, Mountain Dew. They're not paying me for that. But I'm here today as a mother. I'm here today as the daughter of courageous immigrants who left their country seeking a better life here in this country. I belong to a pro-union working family. My background is in social work. My background is in faith-based community organizing. So thank goodness for my faith, thank goodness for the family that gave me those values to be able to get through difficult days like today. But I want you all to know that I sit here unapologetically a lifelong Democrat, and I share the same values that you all do. And I'm ready to fight for those values because I have seen the American dream fade before our eyes as I struggle with you to pay for my student debt, as I struggle with you to pay for my mortgage, as I sit here exhausted because I work currently 2 jobs. I was working more than those, but now that I'm running for Congress, I actually had to take a financial hit to be here and make sure that I can represent the district. I've been traveling for about 1.5 years because this is personally important to me, and as a community organizer, I have been trained to listen. And that's what I've been doing. I've been listening to your concerns, and I want you to know that your fight is my fight, and that is why I'm here before you today. Thank you.
Alex?
I think my mic might be dead.
Let's get a good one for it.
It's actually, can everybody hear me? Great.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. So, hi everyone, my name is Alex Walker, and I am so tired of this. And by this, yeah, I mean waking up every day and seeing some new atrocity on the news, but I also mean Democrats not playing to win. I am so tired of watching us be polite when civil rights are back on the ballot, when Sol's kids need to be worried for their safety at school. This is a moment when we as a party need to stand up and unapologetically say that this is not okay. And we are not the party of civility, we are the party of civil rights. And those are very different things. And so this is our moment to stand up, and the reason I'm standing up and running is not because I've always dreamed of being a congressperson. I don't want to be president. I hate politics. I'm running for my survival. Because since the election of Donald Trump and Lauren Boebert, the number of times I've been called a fag in this district is more than I had ever been called in my entire life up until that point. And what happened? Did the whole district move out and a bunch of homophobes move in? No. Lauren Boebert and Donald Trump's presence in our democracy emboldened a hateful streak in people who live next door to us. And that has ripped us apart because now we think that everybody we live next door to is a monster. And they are not. We are not as divided as social media wants us to believe that we are. And I'm running because I'm tired of us being turned into a bunch of hateful, fearful people by a vocal minority of terrorists. And so I'm here to fight like hell for my survival, but I'm also here to fight for a Colorado for the future with clean jobs that pay our families a real wage, that pick them back above the GOP poverty line they have been living in this district for 15 years. I am running for basic human rights, I'm running for accessible health care, and I am running for survival. So this is our moment to stand up and finally say that we are going to fight like hell for what's right. And to do that, we don't need somebody with the fanciest insultants. We don't need the richest person in the room. We need somebody who knows the policy, but most importantly, someone who can stand up to people like Lauren Boebert, because the second I beat her in this race, I'm going to be going up against people like her every day in Congress. That is the new name of the game, and I wish it weren't, but it is. I can't thank all of you enough for being here tonight. I am so humbled by everybody who shows up to these. You are the reason the Democratic Party is still standing, and I'm looking forward to chatting more with you about policy tonight. Thank you.
Thank you all for your opening statements. We are now going to move into the question and answer portion of this forum. And again, you will each have 2 minutes to answer this question, and we are going to begin with Saul. So for our first question, we're going to start with something very broad, and that is, what would you do to improve the lives of Colorado's rural communities?
So I want to begin by letting you know that I have worked at the Department of Social Services, and while you can imagine that I was able to witness how individuals couldn't afford hearing aids, insulin, prescriptions, just things that everyday people need just to simply survive. I have that experience. I know how our systems are failing us. I know that if you earn 50 more cents or $1 an hour, now suddenly you have to try to find a way to pay for healthcare. I know that. But I also want you to know, most importantly, that I announced within a month of Lauren Boebert being in office because I knew I had seen enough, and I knew that a district that is this geographically, just huge, I knew that it was going to take for me to truly listen to that many people. So I announced in February, right after she had just taken office for a month, because I knew that in order for me to serve you, I needed to know and understand everything that you were going through. And when I announced, I said, in Pueblo, we are lacking opportunities. People pack their bags and move away. And guess what? On my very first trip to San Luis, when I was talking to Roy, a rancher in San Luis, he said, here's my son, I want you to meet him. He's on his way out because he has to move to Colorado Springs. There are no opportunities here. So I want you to know that while I know that the conditions in Pueblo are dire, as I've been traveling through the district for more than a year and a half, I have seen how much more difficult lives are for people in rural areas. I have driven over the Monarch Pass at 11 o'clock at night as I was getting to the assembly, okay? Right after I went through Monarch, I had to go through Gunnison with both of my children in the back of my vehicle. And I did that because our democracy is at stake. And I want to make sure that your schools are fully funded. I want to make sure that you have access to telehealth and mental health service and everything else that you need. And I've been able to witness that, including infrastructure needs, as I'm traveling the district.
Thank you. Well, now go to Alex.
Great, thank you. There are 3 things that I have seen facing folks in these communities more than, let's say, folks living in urban areas might face. And those are inflation, mental health, and drought. Now, we're going to talk about things like how to build clean jobs and how to build affordable housing. We'll touch on those things later, but I want to highlight those three things because, first of all, suicide rates in this district, especially amongst young people, my friends, are skyrocketing because they do not have access to quality mental health care and they are isolated. And being young on social media right now is toxic. And so, first of all, we need to keep folks in rural areas alive. The second thing is inflation. When the Fed prints more money, which it has been doing and is going to do, and that's a big reason inflation is going up, we simply have to get more cash into the marketplace. That disproportionately affects people in rural communities because that cash actually doesn't make it out to our pockets. And that is just a reality of living in rural America, and that's not fair. And there's also no reason that rural America needs to feel the brunt of inflation because this isn't 1812. Your coffee shop takes credit. And so the fact that cash is still impacting our family's ability to put food on the table is something that can be addressed tomorrow. And no Republican has come up with a great reason yet that that shouldn't happen, so we should make it happen before they do. And finally, we're going to talk a lot about water tonight, but we must renegotiate interstate compacts because the interstate compacts that are currently in effect are taking away a good portion of water which families and the ag communities in our district are entitled to. And we can get into that in a little bit.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Adam.
The most important thing we can do is get rid of Lauren Boulevard serving us in Congress, point blank. Not only because she's an embarrassment, and not only because she's not focused on the district. She is the leader of what I call the entertainment industry, and it's divisive, and it's ruining the country, and it's ruining this district, and she's not even fighting for the people who voted her in on issues that are important. And we need someone that we can be proud of who's actually going to focus on our district in a bipartisan manner, because that's what it's going to need to vote to win. Number one issue is inflation, without a doubt. Prices are skyrocketing. We can talk about housing. We can talk about healthcare. We can talk about childcare. We can talk about prescription drugs. And having a 30-year business background, both in international finance as well as a local small business owner on the Western Slope, I have a pretty good handle on some of the supply chain issues that are going through. And I spent 8 years on city council up in Aspen and have been working on affordable housing since 2009 when I first got involved in what was then I called elected community service. And it's really been humbling to drive around the entire state, Trinidad, having affordable housing conversations and concerns, Pueblo, and in Junction, and in South Fork, and Alamosa. We have an epidemic when it comes to housing and healthcare, rural access especially. My wife has diabetes, and even she needs to drive down to Denver once a month. And it's really important that we have more accessible healthcare in rural America. And I'll spend a little bit of time talking about it at a later time, but the Democratic Party has become incredibly urban-centric. These are conversations I have in Denver, and I have these conversations in DC. And we need a Democratic Party that can focus on rural America, and we need to fight to get rural America back into the Democratic hands, because the policies will work a lot better than what's being taken care of now. Thank you.
Thank you all. So for this next question, we are going to begin with Alex, and we will rotate accordingly. So, as you all know, Colorado plans to get to 100% renewable energy by 2040. Have you considered, this is a two-part question, have you considered the impact that moving to a greener economy will have on gas, oil, and coal workers and their families? And what would you say to a gas, oil, or coal worker who is likely to lose their job in the next 20 years?
Here's what I would say. Do you want more money? Because clean jobs pay more over the next 5 years than dirty jobs will. Because demand for clean energy is going up and demand for dirty energy is going down. And I think clean energy is an incredible opportunity for CD3 and for Colorado to build an economy for the future where our families are no longer fighting to make 15% less than the median American family makes. And if we can embrace wind and solar, but also hard technologies like battery manufacturing, which are just as pivotal to the shift to clean energy and which are currently underserved by American manufacturers, that sets our families up to make well over the median. And that won't go away anytime soon. We won't have to confront this issue again for 80 years. And so when Republicans try to get me on the environment, I say, fine, if you want to be a climate denier, that's fine. I'm not going to try and change your hearts and minds on that. But do you really want a lower paycheck? Because if you elect me, you're not going to have to bicker about this anymore because you'll be making more money, eating more food, you'll have healthier, happier kids, and you're not going to be breathing smog all day. And so I think the shift to clean energy is something that Democrats can and must turn into a huge economic win instead of rat-holing on the environmental arguments.
Thank you. Adam?
Yeah, great question, thank you. I think people might be surprised to know that this county has, I believe, one live well in practice right now. There's one well only. The identity of the oil and gas industry in this community and the extraction business going back to uranium and coal is long lasting, and that needs to be honored and respected. One of the biggest problems that I think the Democratic Party has had in this energy conversation is that I think a lot of the men and women that are working in the oil and gas industry and the coal industry fully are aware of the changes that are happening. Hunters are hunting at different times, farmers are planting at different times, there's usually one less cut of hay. The ranchers are running into the same issues of what's been happening in the weather and the climate change. The problem that I think is the loudest voices coming from DC have been incredibly demeaning to a lot of rural America, especially those that are working in the oil and gas industry. And I promise everyone that I will not demean anyone for putting food on their plate for their family, especially when I'm pretty sure the workers here use a lot less energy per capita than the constituents in urban New York City when those representatives are yelling and screaming at how these people should quit their jobs and wait 5 or 6 years. Pueblo is a great example. We have that old classic, the mill down there is 90-some% solar power now. That to me is a live action item that can actually prove instead of just talking about energy transformation. I'm proud that I helped institute the first municipal 100% green energy, renewable energy in the country, up in Pickens County in Aspen. There's some lessons there that won't transfer elsewhere, but there's a lot of lessons that can transfer elsewhere to figure out how to get involved. And as Alex said, there's a lot of higher paid jobs out there. It's going in the right direction. The Democratic Party just needs to treat people with a lot more respect that are still in that business, and they need to be honored.
Thank you. And Saul?
To anyone who is currently tuning in or listening here today, I want you to know that if you work for this industry and you are in any way afraid of losing your job, I want you to know that I grew up in poverty, and I know personally what it feels like to wonder whether or not you're going to have food on the table. And I would never support a transition that does not include you continuing to be able to provide for your family. Yes, I care about clean air. Yes, I care about renewables. Of course I do. I'm raising 2 children. Of course I want a future for them and my grandchildren. But I would never take away food from you. I'm going to support training for you. I'm going to make sure that you have everything you need in place so that you can transition from your current job into a renewable job that is going to be union supported to ensure that whether it's seniority or anything it was that you were already counting on to provide for your family, any benefits that you have, they're going to come along with you. I am the daughter, a lifelong union member, so I know how important it is to be able to provide for your family. And I would never support a transition that doesn't mean that your quality of life wouldn't remain the same, that your benefits wouldn't remain the same. In fact, I would only support something that even improved it, because I realize how hard it is to live right now. When I go to the grocery store, I know how tough we're getting hit. I'm not eating as much steak as I used to. So know that I personally understand.
Thank you. For our next question, we will begin with Adam. We have seen a resurgence of the labor movement in our country. with some major companies, including Starbucks and Amazon, beginning to unionize. What, if anything, would you do to support those looking to unionize? And if you do not support unionization, please explain why.
Thank you for the question. So I was just down in Pueblo last week, and I had a 90-minute conversation with 10 labor leaders, as well as spent time with the school union. My wife is the president of our school board, and she's worked very, very hard to make sure teachers are looked after, and she was helpful putting in the very first master labor agreement in place of the school, and I think that's really important. What I have the conversations I have with the labor leaders out there, that I fully support the PRO Act that's in Congress right now. There's two other big bills, I think 1527 and 1847. They have 90-some support in Democratic circles, and I'm supportive of those. There's even 5 to 15 Republicans that are also supporting the labor laws that are there. I think if people want to get together and have those discussions, and whether it's at Starbucks or Amazon or other places, and they want to have those things, I think that's a helpful thing to happen. I think Colorado's had its own starts and fits with this, as far as trying to figure out how to provide flexibility for some owners, but also make sure that the workers are looked after. I think it's very, very impressive what's been happening down again at the steel mill, and the protection and the wages that are there, and the conversations I had with the labor leaders there. It's not only moving out from the old industry to the new industry, it's when the concern is when the jobs go from $50 an hour to $17 an hour. And it's not only important about the transition into a new job, but it's important to transition to a job that has protections on wages and benefit and healthcare as well. And so there might be more specific question about which ones would go, but I would not want to stand in the way of Starbucks and Amazon type of employees getting together to try to decide their own conversations and how they want a workplace that they want to work in.
Thank you. Saul?
My very first march was actually with janitors, because my parents are lifelong janitors, lifelong union members. So I was only a child when I attended my very first demonstration. So this is something that hits home for me. I also want you to know that not only did my life improve, but I've already marched with teachers, I've already marched with faith leaders to make sure that we bring those types of jobs and opportunities, and to make sure that people can actually take a sick day when they're not feeling well, to make sure they can take care of their elderly parents and their children when they're experiencing a health emergency. So this is something that hits home to me, but I want you to know that as someone who grew up in a union family, not only do I know that they're important to make sure that corporations are not taking advantage of you because they're greedy, but it's also going to improve the benefits and the wages of the entire area and region where you work. Anytime that there's a union employer, it is no secret that everyone else's wages improve, everyone else's life will improve if there is an employer that is supported by a union. So I know that, and I want you to know that for me, I also live in Pueblo, which is a union town. I grew up knowing and understanding the importance of collective power, the importance of standing up to corporations that will take advantage of us if we don't stand up to them. So this is something that, again, my first march was when I was a child. So you're preaching to the choir here.
Thank you. And Alex?
Yeah. Unions to me are the central nervous system of the working class. And as we all know, the pros and the cons, which we've sort of been conditioned with. Pros, it helps people organize, it helps people collectively bargain for higher wages, healthcare. Con, it sometimes limits our GDP because a corporation then can't make record profits. That con is crap. That con is just lobbyists. If GDP is just a measure of corporate greed, what good is that metric? And so would I stand in the way of Starbucks standing in the way of their workers unionizing? Hell yeah, I would. I mean, right now, Apple is spending millions of dollars to union bust in a bunch of their retail stores, and this should be front page news. This is one of the largest I mean, until 2 weeks ago, the largest corporation in the world, leading by example by saying that people shouldn't be able to collectively bargain. They make plenty of money. Most of these corporations do. So, no, Congress is the house of the people, and we must be fighting for the people, and most people need a union.
Thank you. For our next question, we'll begin with Saul. We have faced unprecedented numbers and ferocity of wildfires and drought in recent years. And even with the right policies, global climate change will not end overnight. How do you intend to ensure that the West is resilient to drought and wildfires?
If you elect me, you are going to count on a congresswoman who believes in climate change. And I want you all to know that one of the things that we need to work on is preserving water. We have got to preserve water. We have got to protect the water that is originating here in CD3. Climate change is something that if we don't invest in our wildland firefighters, if we don't invest in mitigation, if we don't give the experts the resources that they need, they're not going to have the funding that they need to be able to protect us. Wildfires are increasing. They even impacted my team. I have people on my team who are like, I need to evacuate. We are now not only seeing an increase in these wildfires, but they're happening more frequently, and we can no longer ignore it. So we have got to invest in the experts. We have to believe in the information that is being presented to us. And it is one thing to take a picture with a firefighter, and it's a totally other, to actually vote in favor of the resources and the health benefits and everything that's going to make sure that we have the experts in place. And for as long as we continue to elect individuals who are disconnected from this district, I've lived here 20 years, so I'm very familiar with this district, we are going to continue to get the same results. So we've got to preserve water. We've got to start having conversations about switching over to renewables, making sure that those individuals are going to have the same type of benefits, that their jobs are going to be, secure, and for people to know that, we're going to actually invest in bills. We're actually going to vote in favor of things that are going to bring us the funding. The infrastructure bill, for example, would have given us the funding to ensure that when communities are transitioning, we've got the funding that we need to make up the difference.
Thank you. Alex.
Yeah, if we want to support those policies, we need to have them and know what the policies are. And 57% of sitting members in Congress support two things: carbon tax incentives and reforestation, both of which can hugely mitigate the frequency and scope of wildfires. So that is day one. And the only reason we're not doing that is because we're too busy arguing over whether climate change is real. Well, let's focus on what we can get done with morons like Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene in Congress, because we have to work with them. And so you start there. You start with carbon tax incentives, and you start with reforestation. And then you renegotiate interstate compacts, because under the terms of the Upper Colorado River Compact, which has been in effect for over 70 years, whose interim terms went into effect 15 years ago and are set to be renegotiated in 5, Colorado is entitled to just 51.75% of the water flowing through the upper basin, even though we account for more than that share of the collective GDP of upper basin states. That's just not fair. And so if we are going to have wildfires, which we certainly are, we need water to put them out. And so by failing to renegotiate these compacts, and by the way, I've been told that we shouldn't do that because we would lose the negotiations. Yeah, we will if we send losers, but if we send people to those discussions who know how to argue for growth in our GDP, both in CD3 and in Colorado, we stand a very good chance of getting up to 60, 62, 65% of that water. And I only have 17 seconds, so I'll talk about gray water recycling when we get to water. But that is where I would start.
Thank you. Adam.
Thank you. We're in the middle of a 1,200-year drought. We obviously need to do some long-term planning about trying to do that. But in the meantime, And these are conversations I've had in the legislative process, not just on child care and housing, but also in water mitigation and protection, and as well as wildfire mitigation, which is really important. There has to be some level of conversation of adaptability, realizing this is the low grid right now, we're going to be in it for some time, and we need to have conversations to make sure that we do that. The number one thing is do not turn down funding when it is available to have it come back to your district, especially on things like wildfire. And we obviously have a representative that turned it down and then came home and sent on a flyer that she brought all this stuff home. And this directly affects, this goes into this transportation conversation, because the reason the I-70 Canyon closed was because of the wildfires, and then a year later, all that soil disappeared, and the mudslides happened. And so anyone who doesn't think wildfire has a direct economic impact, especially on rural western slope, is kidding themselves. And we can get into another type of byway about the canyon, but the reason the canyon has failed so frequently is because of the loss of soil erosion due to the lack of trees because of the fires that have happened. So it's really, really important that we capture and retain every drop of water that comes down in the middle of this drought, and realize that it has a direct cause on what happens from an economic standpoint. And we can't afford to have I-70 closed down for nearly as much as it did over the past couple of years. It was economically crippling to a lot of people, and I certainly know that it was economically crippling to a lot of people out here in the true western slope. So this adaptability is going to be important for a long time. At the same time, we try to work on the bigger picture of trying to figure out how to get some water back in here on a global climate change conversation and see our water basins filled up.
And that is a fantastic segue to our next question, which we will begin with Alex. Let's see here. What will you do to conserve water, especially in new developments, as the state continues to grow?
Great. So I just talked about the Upper Colorado River Compact. I won't go into that again, but that is, first of all, the way that we get more water to begin with. And then part two is keeping the water that we are able to harvest. And we can do that by investing in gray water recycling infrastructure. I don't know if folks here are familiar with Regulation 86. As a citizen, I wasn't, which is a huge problem. Regulation 86 is the regulation that stipulates fair and proper uses for gray water. And a very small number of counties in our district, in our congressional district, have taken that regulation up and put it into effect. And by doing that, we could save, many, many millions of metric tons of water per quarter. It really does change the equation completely. And that is almost entirely focused on new developments, because many of the use cases stipulated in Regulation 86 stipulate what new developments such as affordable housing need to be doing in order to keep a certain percentage of water recycled within that complex. And then this directly goes back to help our agricultural communities, whom, as we know, are the backbone of CD3. And urban areas are far less regulated than rural areas when it comes to water use. And that also needs to change, because agriculture is what is driving a significant portion of our GDP and of our family's prosperity. And when folks in urban areas are wasting it without knowing that they're wasting it, that hurts all of us. And so spreading awareness of how to recycle water effectively and holding people to that is really important.
Thank you. Adam, what was the
Question, I realized it was a water question. I lost the last part of it.
Yes. What will you do to conserve water, especially in new developments, as the state continues to grow?
Oh, new development. Well, luckily, one of the things that we did up where I live, and you see it in Las Vegas and some other parts of Arizona, is just tighter water regulation and the zero escaping that needs to happen, and realize not everyone does not have a constitutional right to a green lawn 11 months out of the year. And I think that's something that's really, really important that we need to do. And as there's better HVAC systems with heating and ventilation and air conditioning, and the systems in place and irrigation, we need to figure out a way to drop down the irrigation uses to make sure that people realize that they're operating on that on a very small level. And I can't believe it took, I don't know how many years, that finally personal people are able to collect up to two 55-gallon drums of water for their own use. And that water that falls on your roof is not yours in Colorado. I know it's a hard thing for all of us to realize. Some of that roof water ends up in California, in Arizona, or in Mexico, and that's another thing that's hard to challenge. But on a very small matter, we are allowed to capture two 55-gallon drums, so that will help a little bit. But the main thing is conservation and making sure that we have high energy efficiency, not just in water, but in all aspects of the system that are going to affect global climate change as we start to grow, and a focus on multi-unit developments, because that's also an efficient way to house people and start to work on some of the very important aspects to the affordable housing crisis that this whole state is running into.
Thank you. And so,
So as a social worker, I have served everyone, Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated voters, anyone that came through the door, I served. And as a community organizer, I have been trained to listen. Before you do anything, before you take action on anything, before you move forward, you listen. And so I have already, as a candidate, started investing in developing relationships with Republicans. Why? Because water is something that impacts everyone. Water is life. Our lives, our livelihoods literally depend on water. So I have already sat down with Republican Senator Cleve Simpson, because I know that while there are some things that are not up for negotiating, like women's rights, there are some things that I'm not going to be flexible on. Guess what? Water is one of those things that we are going to have to sit together and work across party lines. So I need you to know that I'm already investing in developing those relationships. I'm listening, I'm learning, and I am ready to protect our water.
thank you. For our next question, we will begin with Adam. And this question is, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen two horrific attacks on people just going about their lives, going to schools, going to grocery stores. Will you fight to ban assault weapons and put into place a national red flag policy?
As Saul talked about, it was obviously a horrible day yesterday. It hit home for me because before I was doing this, when COVID started, I got my 3-year substitute teaching license. And I focused working in elementary school, mostly with pre-K-4. And the comment I made to people was the thought of the best part of the day of being a teacher is with young kids, is watching the kids and the parents smile on them and they go to pick up the kids. And to think that there's 18 or 20 families more that are not going to be doing that is really heartbreaking. And when people asked me at the start of this conversation back in February when I decided to run, the Second Amendment came up a lot. And I said, well, it's a pretty Second Amendment conversation. We need to respect that. I just hope that the next things that are commonplace is mandating guns in schools. And what was supposed to be a joke has turned into a precedent, because the conversation now is trying to arm and train school teachers before they can teach in school to be armed and ready to go. And so we obviously have an epidemic. How we handle healthcare in this country is laughed upon in the global stage, only the second to what happens in our gun culture here. And I'm not sure what the answers are, but there needs to be a way to figure out how to, and we have the same mental health statistics, sadly, as a lot of the world, so it's not a mental health issue. We need to figure out a way to have fewer people who shouldn't be having guns, and guns that are not needed for Second Amendment rights, to figure out how to get those under control. The conversation is going to be, as long as there's fewer than 60 Democratic senators, the question is what can we get done in place? And everything I'm going to do is going to be in a bipartisan way and try to figure out how to chip away at some sensible gun legislation. Is going to be important. What those look like, that'll be up for conversation.
Thank you. And Saul.
So I have already shared with you all that, I didn't sleep really well last night, and it's not the first time that I've dropped off my kids at school and I've experienced that fear, wondering if my kids are going to be safe. And so, while as a mother, my heart weighs heavy today and I'm sleep deprived because of it, like many of you are, the reality is that I am a gun owner. and I know how important that Second Amendment right is to us as Americans in our culture. And while I know that some things are really difficult to do and it's gonna take a long time, there are some things that are practical that we can do quickly and efficiently. And one of those things is we can actually, right now, support the fact that there's a bill sitting right now in the Senate that is actually addressing background checks. So we have got to make sure that the Senate listens to us and they know that we support background checks. Background checks are a way for us to be able to ensure that, if you have been, say for example, if you have been in a mental hold or anything like that, right? If you're dealing with a mental health crisis, that you are not able to purchase a gun. If you just walked out of something like that, if you're dealing with something like that. We also need to support those programs to ensure that if you are dealing with a mental health crisis, you feel supported and that it's not relevant whether you have insurance or not. So, making sure that background checks, that is something that right now the Senate could pass, is actually, going through is one way, and the other way is just making sure, like you said, when there are those instances that we have individuals that are dealing with a crisis, that we have a system in place where we can track it and get that information out. So, as a mother, my heart weighs heavy, and I lift in prayer anyone who is impacted by that horrible devastation.
Thank you. And Alex?
This makes me mad because honestly, that was a lot of political speak, and we are actually running for a job where we do need to have the answers and we do need to have concrete policy proposals. And this shit is not complicated. You close the Charleston loophole, which increased the amount of time that a background check can be performed and is the reason 90% of mentally infirm people get their hands on guns. You ban assault rifles and bump stocks. And you put people in prison for brandishing any kind of weapon on school grounds. This shit is not complicated. And if we don't have people who show up in Congress with strongly held opinions about what to do with it and what to do about it, if we show up to Congress with people who say, let's have a conversation, convince me of what you think, where are we going to get? I'm not having kids until I know they're not going to die. That is why I'm running. And this issue just drives me up a fucking wall because Democrats refuse to be impolite about it. That is what we have to do. It's not complicated. We can get it done. There is bipartisan support for many of the things I just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't feel you directly about either of the two others on stage, but I just want to see if either of you would like a rebuttal for this. Well, good.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying or pushing back, Alex. I appreciate that. Red flag, yes, and background check, yes. I was talking, might not have had to just check those off instead of the start, so that's not a problem with those two things. It's a mental health conversation, and guns seem to be out of the people that can cause the most harm.
Thank you. That's all of you.
While I am a gun owner, I do believe in a responsible gun ownership, and I do believe in protecting our children, and absolutely those are two ways that we can do that. Support the bill that is currently sitting in the Senate to ensure that background checks are something that we pass in our state. I'm planning on passing that at the federal level, and yes, on red flags, of course.
Thank you. All right, that was a heavy question, and so for our next one, we'll move to a little bit lighter. And we will hear from Saul first. And this one is, what are your greatest strengths and what are your biggest weaknesses?
So, greatest strengths. First of all, as you all know, when we started, it was a crowded field. It was so difficult to fundraise. It was so difficult to get anyone to listen in the beginning because all I kept hearing was, there's a crowded field. Well, guess what? Even though at some point, I think there were about 7 of us trying to get on the ballot, I have proven to you that I know how to listen, that I know how to win a race. I was literally the only candidate that went through the assembly process with almost 50% support from the entire Democratic delegation. I have proven to you that I know how to raise money. I have raised already more than $800,000, not from my personal pocket, but from voters in this district with an average contribution of $26, which demonstrates that my campaign is a grassroots effort. I know how to organize. Hablo español. I'm going to engage voters that have felt left out. That 43% of unaffiliated voters who have felt that they're unheard of, guess what? I, as an organizer, have friends throughout the district who are supporting me as organizers, and that's going to make the difference. If you don't know how to turn people out, if you don't know how to listen, if you don't know how to engage people, if you don't know how to work across party lines. I've been serving people for 20 years. I have been on the front lines, watching how veterans are lined up in their food distributions in Pueblo, holding on to walkers. I know that food pantries are low on food right now in Pueblo. I'm not running because, this is sexy. I'm not running because I'm bored. I'm running because I'm frustrated. I'm working 2 jobs while I'm running, by the way. I dropped off my kids in school and I came here because this is important to me. Thank you for your support. Know that I know how to win. Know that I'm only here because I know that we can win this district and take back CD3.
Thank you, Alex.
I'm shameless. I think some of you maybe saw my launch commercial where human feces were falling from the sky. And if you didn't, you should go watch it, even if it makes you dislike me, because I am truly unafraid of getting up and saying things that people don't want to hear. And it's not because I'm wired to upset people. I'm a pretty shy person, actually, and when I told my partner Will that I was doing this, he's sort of the JFK of that pair, and he was like, you hate public speaking, why would you do this? And I'm doing it because I think we need fewer people in Congress who want to be in Congress. And part of that means not electing sociopaths, and I'm not one. I don't care if 1 million people love me or hate me. I care if the people that I care about are proud of me. And that means that I stand for things that I care deeply about, and I am unapologetic about that. I think my biggest weakness in all this is that I'm inexperienced. And that's sort of a necessary evil. At some point, my generation needs to stop being asleep at the wheel and step up and start running for stuff. And so there are going to be a few inexperienced folks in the beginning. But that has really hurt me in some ways. I don't benefit from nepotism. I don't have tons of connections in high places. Everything I've done, I have done through the power of a grassroots campaign. We have almost 10,000 supporters with an average donation size of $25. And I'm the only one up here who hasn't already blown $1 million because I think money is ruining politics. So is my inexperience going to lose me a race? I don't know, but am I proud of the way I'm doing this? Yeah.
Thank you, Adam.
My 14-year-old daughter has 19 minutes of my weaknesses, so I'm trying to figure out how to bring up the top 27. We'll figure it out. I don't have, I get impatient a lot, and this might be the wrong job profession, just like I don't have a mirror above my bathroom sink, because I don't like to look at myself, and the thought of walking down Main Street on the 4th of July is going to give me the heebie-jeebies, but I do believe, leading to my strengths, I stand up when it's important to stand up, and I do it in a collaborative way. And that collaboration is going to happen when I go work with the Problem Solvers Caucus in Washington, D.C., which is made up of 29 Republicans and 29 Democrats. Because the only way the seat can be won is by earning the trust of some non-Democrats. I'm proud to have Dr. Debbie Burnett's support, Donald Valdez's support, and Colin Wilhelm's support on our campaign. So my coalition building in collaboration manner has started now, before I got to Congress. And when I go there, and I'm a nice person, and while some people might view that as a weakness in this room, I think it's a strength, and it's an inner strength that I think a lot of people are looking for. They want this entertainment industry to calm down, and I'm a pro-normal candidate, and I think that's something that's really, really important. And I'm focused on the results, and I get things done. People can get fired up, and they can be very bright, which I'm not one of them. But I've been very, very effective in business. I've been very, very effective in the public sector and the nonprofit world. And it's because I put my head down, I don't wiggle my ego, and I get the job done. And I think that's what this district is looking for a lot. And so I appreciate the time to be up here. Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you. For our next question, we will begin with Alex. And the question is, and you have all referenced this evening, suicides in rural Colorado are a national high. Western Colorado has higher suicide rates than almost anywhere in the nation. And veteran suicides in particular are way up. What are your thoughts on how we can provide better health care, especially mental health care, for everyone, but especially veterans?
There are a few things that can make me cry, but this is one of them. I don't think I will, but sorry in advance. I lost my brother 10 years ago to a struggle with mental health, and he was left behind by our system in ways that people in rural Colorado are being left behind every day. And he was viewed as a second-class citizen because he struggled with several forms of mental illness and couldn't hold a conventional job. And this is something that my dad and I have sort of devoted our lives to, frankly, is trying to find people who are in these types of situations and give them opportunities, which is much of what I spent my career doing. So I've seen firsthand what happens if we don't get crazy people out of Congress. This isn't an ego trip. This is actually costing lives and blanketing rural Colorado in broadband to massively improve access to telehealth and mental health would be a game changer. Not just for young people like my brother once was, but for veterans struggling with PTSD. And also, it's worth noting, our agricultural community really struggles with mental health. The number of farmers I've chatted with who will tell me they are fine, but then I talk to their kids, and they tell me that their mom or dad isn't fine, and they actually feel the weight of the world on their shoulders as they struggle to put food on the table and be the backbone of Colorado industry, despite the fact that they don't have natural resources. That's heartbreaking. And I would be deeply anxious and depressed about that too, and they have nowhere to turn to. And so there are things we can do tomorrow to drastically improve their chances of survival.
Thank you. Adam.
Yeah, it's tough, without a doubt. It's not just Western Colorado, but the neighborhood closer to me, Pickton County and Garfield County, have the highest suicide rates in the country. Money certainly doesn't solve all problems at all. When I came out here, I don't think I'd ever gone, when I moved out here in 2002, I don't think I ever went to a funeral for someone under the age of, grandparents' age. And I think I went to 6 funerals of people in their 30s and 40s, and 50s at the oldest. And so there's no doubt, this goes back to, we need to figure out a way to get better healthcare access, physical as well as mental in rural America. The telemedicine, the Zoom will allow some of that. Making sure that, I know the VA, and I've had these conversations, there's a great facility down in Denver. They're trying to reorganize some of the remote outposts now to make sure that our veterans are looked after. CD3 has a higher than average percentage of veterans living in the population. I'm very aware that Grand Junction and Fruita especially have, thank you everyone for your service, including Charlie, for this, and it's a really important aspect. And it all goes back to making sure that there's a representative that is going to fight for the district. Republicans get sick too. Republicans have mental health issues too. And we have someone in Congress who's not focused on bringing home resources, and which is really needed. I think 12 of the 16 poorest counties in Colorado are in CD3. And Debbie Burnett just shared a link with me today that we watched. And it was a Facebook conversation. It was exactly about the mental health anguishes they're going through, the farmers and ranchers and the ag business in this community. And it's a sad conversation that needs to happen. It goes back to making sure that the Democratic Party is focused on rural America, not just the 20 biggest cities, which seems to be where all the action is. And rural America needs to be fought over by both parties. And right now it's being ignored by one and taken advantage by the other.
Thank you. And so,
So I agree with both Alex and Adam. Thank you so much for sharing with us your personal experiences. So Lauren Bober had only been in office for 1 month when I announced that I was running, and that was because I knew how large the district was and I knew how important it was to stay in tune and to listen. So I've been listening and I've been having conversations with folks all across the district. And even though I might live in Pueblo, in the home of the heroes, and I'm in tune with the issues happening there, I still take the time to stay engaged with everything that's happening here in Grand Junction. So I know that you have opened a new mental health wing here at the Grand Junction Veterans Hospital. And I want you to know that I just want that to be the beginning of all the different services that we need to continue to provide veterans with. I want you to know that mental health is extremely important to me, and I know that that's something that's being experienced all across the district. In Pueblo, we've got veterans lined up at food distribution. You know, we're not taking care of our veterans. We need to bring our veterans back home. We have deported so many veterans. There are just so many issues impacting you. I realize that you're struggling to live right now on fixed income. You have fought for my freedom, and I'm ready to fight for you in Congress.
thank you all for sharing. Those are powerful stories. This will be our last question for this evening before we move to closing statements, and it's a two-part question. And we will begin with Adam. Can you say, I don't know? And will you admit when you make a mistake?
That's easy, because I made the front page of the Pueblo Chieftain for mucking up a beat Bobart barbecue tour. I traveled 2,500 miles and went to 18 different cities. And we, my team, and which means I need to own that, made a mistake. And I wrote a letter to the editor apologizing and explaining that. And it was written about the front page of paper. And the reporter couldn't believe that I was actually a politician actually apologizing. And as again, I have to apologize to my 14-year-old daughter every 20 minutes. So I can do it publicly and I can do it privately. And I, it's a listening and learning tour that I go on at all times. And there's a lot of things I do not know. But I know my convictions, and I know I stand up when it's important to stand up, and that's what I'm doing now. But saying there's a book out saying what's the hardest word, and the punchline is saying sorry. And I do say a lot because I'm certainly not perfect. I'm very, very fallible, but my heart's always in the right place.
Thank you. So,
Tyler, this is by far my favorite question. So happy it's here. So I want you all to know that when something comes across my desk, let's face it, my background is in serving people for 20 years. I know, I'm experienced in understanding this district. I'm experienced in listening. I'm experienced in a lot of things. But I'm no policy buff. That's not my background. My background is how do policies impact people? But I know how to pick up the phone and say, this issue impacts women's rights. I'm going to call Cobalt. I'm going to call Color, who, by the way, is endorsing me. I know how to reach out to the experts because I know-it-all. And I want you to know that when something comes across my desk, I'm not going to look at whether there's a D or there's an R. I'm going to ask myself, how does this improve the life of the people who live in this district? And if it is something that is specific to veterans, guess what? I'm going to contact them. If it's something specific to unions, I'm going to call the AFL-CIO. If it's something pertaining to healthcare, I know who to call. So know that I am really good at asking experts for advice, for help, for support, because I am know-it-all. And I actually take great pride in looking at people in the eye and saying, I'm not a policy buff, but I'm surrounded by experts, and I will be relying on those experts.
Alex.
Thanks. I already told you guys that I'm a novice, which is basically me sitting up here and saying there's a lot I don't know. I'm a mechanical engineer. If I don't admit that I don't know things, people die, and cars explode, and bridges fall down. So that's been beaten into me. But I'm better at listening than I am at talking. And the reason running has been rewarding for me. I thought it would be rewarding because I would get to meet like-minded Democrats, but it's actually been rewarding because I've spent 90% of my time talking to Republicans. going into a gas station with a Trump flag hanging over the door and a life-size cardboard cutout of Lauren Boebert by the register. Those are the people I spend most of my time with, not because I'm a masochist, but because it's actually genuinely interesting when you approach these people and you just say, I come in peace, there's plenty about the Democratic Party I also don't like, and I don't necessarily understand why we do the things we do, but I also don't understand the reasons you guys do what you do. We end up having some pretty great conversations, and I hope that that's foreshadowing of what being in Congress would be like, right down to the Trump flag over a desk, because there are plenty of ways to talk to people about really difficult things if you're willing to approach that discussion not off your high horse, but actually just from a place of humility and saying, I don't have all the answers. I came armed with a lot of research, but that is not the same thing as knowing who you are, what you care about, what you've been through. And this is sort of just in my DNA. I like having those kinds of conversations more than I like getting on a soapbox and preaching.
Thank you. And I think we may actually have a little bit more time before we get to closing. And so I just want to ask a quick question. This is a personal liberty I'm taking as moderator. What is your favorite thing about the 3rd Congressional District? And I believe we'll start with Saul for this one.
The people, the friendships. I have actually befriended a rancher by the name of Roy, and it was my very first stop when I first started traveling the district, and just being able to listen to this man, cracked hands, hard worker, and I'm there to introduce myself, very first stop, a little bit nervous, and I'm there to introduce myself, and he goes, no, wait, my son's about to leave. I want you to meet my son. My son is leaving to Colorado Springs because there are no opportunities here. I literally said that in Pueblo, we've got young people packing their bags and moving away because of lack of opportunities. Being able to listen to people, getting a daily prayer from Roy, who is a hardcore Catholic, it just makes my day because I know that there are working people across this district who are starving for someone who understands what it's like to struggle, who are starving for someone who can say, I'm drowning in student debt with you. I am afraid to walk into an ER because I don't know if I can afford to pay that bill. I'm going to fight for fair wages because my mother is 72 years old and she is still marching with unions at USC because she cannot afford to retire. I want people to retire with dignity. It is time that we elect people who understand the district. I'm experienced in this district because it's been my home for 20 years. My kids attend the public schools here. I drank the same water with you. I worried about the drought with you. I have listened to all of the stories of how you're impacted by all of the systems that are failing us through the 20 years that I've served my community. I'm experiencing that. And that's the part that I enjoy, getting to know you better.
Thank you. Alex.
The young voters in this district are so unpredictable. I don't even know if they're going to get out of bed in the morning, but then you sort of talk to them about why you're doing this, and then they start opening up about having struggled with mental health or suicide, or they show you their scars, both metaphorically and physically in many cases. And I've come to understand these people and know them as friends, and really understand that the reason they don't turn out is because they don't think it matters. Because they just think the majority is going to push through another schlub who doesn't give a damn about them. And this is especially true in a community I really care about, which is the queer community in CD3. That is such a vibrant community full of people who were raised Republican, moderate, liberal, ambivalent, whatever, and they have all rallied around something which is bigger than politics. It's just humanity. They've rallied around something for survival and because they love each other. And that, to me, is the spirit of CD3. We suffer no fools here. And it's ironic that Lauren Boebert is our congressperson, and I blame a very vocal minority of idiots for that. But not all people who voted for Donald Trump are idiots. Not all young voters are apathetic. We just have to find the right ways to activate these people by treating them like people. And I just learned so much by doing this about who they are and what the Democratic Party can be doing more of to reach them.
Thank you. And Adam?
Yeah, it's been the diversity of the people and the beauty of our district. As someone who's driven a good chunk of it, a couple thousand miles, and I'm doing it every 5 or 6 days, it seems like. We live in the most beautiful district of the 435, and I think that's something that's been important. And the beauty of the people, it's really interesting. There's a lot of fired up people, disgruntled Republicans, and Democrats as well, between who's in office now, the horrendous events that happened with the assault rifles of late, Roe v. Wade on the table, and this community, this district is really fired up. And I think we have a unique opportunity. When there's a regular Republican in office, the Democrats don't do well. That's what happened the last couple times. We have a unique opportunity to close a window on a horrible representative. And I think that's really, really important. The passion that I've come across from young and old, across all the different party affiliations, even if they're not going to vote or not, it's just really great to go out there from Trinidad to Craig to Junction to Montrose to South Fork, Alamosa. There's just in the mountain towns. There's a lot of really great people here that care, and it's really important that we care as we've never cared before in this coming up election.
Thank you all for that. All right, we will now move on to our business statements. And so again, just to reiterate, you all have 3 minutes to close, and we will begin with Alex.
Great. Thank you all for being here tonight. 2 months ago, I would have peed myself at the idea of sitting up here and talking about many of these things. But I feel a sense of kinship with the Democratic Party in this district, and actually specifically in Mesa County, and want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. Our ideals are worthless if we lose. We can be right about everything, and we often are. 65% of American voters agree with us on key issues. 70% of CD3 voters openly identify as moderate. We don't have a messaging problem. Democrats have a ruthlessness problem. We need to be willing to stand up and unapologetically tell the GOP that their time is up, and we are here to bring common sense back to Congress, defend what is right, and we have to be unapologetic about that. I know we often say when they go low, we go high. That's not really my style. When they go low, I'll be waiting with a chainsaw. This is about survival, plain and simple. The Roe ruling, the massacres that have happened over the last 2 weeks, these are real lives that hang in the balance. And all we have to do is stand up and vote. And the way we do that is by picking a champion who knows how to take these fights to the front lines, to the front page. I too wish that our information economy weren't ruled by clickbait, but it is. And that is not going anywhere anytime soon. And so we need somebody who knows how to play the media against itself. That is the brilliance of Donald Trump and Lauren Boebert, and it's not that brilliant. It's pretty easy to match these people on their only real strength, which is getting attention. I have reached 10 million people since launching my campaign. Some of you have seen that launch ad. That accounts for maybe 20% of that. The rest of that traction has come from me getting on social media, getting on TikTok, and explaining the war in Ukraine, gas prices, the economy, inflation. People want to engage with these things, but we have to give them a champion that they want to engage with. And so CD3 needs that champion who will activate a new generation of leaders and change makers so that we can finally pass the torch from generations which have shouldered this burden for far too long towards a new generation which is in waiting and just needs to know what the hell to do. And I am that person, and I am already reaching those communities. communities. So thank you so much for being here tonight. It means the world.
Thank you. And now Saul.
Listen, I'm exhausted with you. The circus has really taken a toll on us. I'm not running because I'm gonna pick fights on the internet. I'm running because I know that when we go to the grocery store, we are selecting other items because the price has gone up. I know how expensive gas is. I know that we're struggling to purchase homes, we're struggling to pay our rent. I have held listening sessions in places like the Westside Mobile Park because I know that this district deserves a representative who's gonna meet people where they are, someone who understands this district. I have lived here 20 years, and I am a bold Democrat because I believe in our values, that it shouldn't matter who your parents work for, where they were born, what language they speak. It shouldn't matter that my parents only have elementary level education. As Democrats, we believe that everyone should access the same opportunity to thrive. Everyone deserves to access education, if that's what they want. That's what a democracy is about. It's being able to access the democracy. It's being able to vote for whomever you want to, and having that accessible to you, regardless of where you live, whether you live in a rural area or in a city. You know, Colorado came in second in the nation when it came down to voter turnout. That is because our system works. We need to bring that to the entire nation. We need to bring unity. We need adults in Congress. We need people who know how to sit down, who understand how the systems are failing us, who understand that people can't afford prescriptions, that veterans can't afford to buy groceries. We need people who are drowning in debt to lead, because we have already allowed individuals who are disconnected. They come with good intentions. We need people who are hurting in the same way that we are to represent us. I have been serving my community for 20 years, and I never imagined that I would be running for Congress. But I've collected enough stories at the Department of Social Services that could make all of you cry. But I'm not gonna do that today. I decided to leave my office because I knew that in my office, I could no longer take watching how people were suffering in poverty and couldn't put food on the table. And if they earned one more dollar, they were cut off from benefits. I know what it's like to not be able to buy diapers and have to use your credit card for formula. I know how expensive childcare is. It is time that we elect someone who's an adult, who's experienced, and who understands what families are going through. And I'm gonna measure my success not by likes, not by picking fights on the internet, but by improving all of our lives in the district. Thank you.
Adam.
Tyler, Charlie, the rest of the crowd here, thank you very much for being here and paying attention to this all analysis. I'm glad we're getting to be live together and have these great conversations. I'm trying to lead the charge to make sure that CD3 in the country turns into the emotional win the Democrats need and deserve. We have a unique opportunity that hopefully will not be short-lived, that because of who's in there now, and we are in an R8 or R9 district, again, whoever you vote for, just make sure that they have some type of ability in different ways, and all different ways that we talk about doing, to build some type of coalition to win and get in office. Because it would be a shame if this district blows this opportunity that they're handing it to us on a plate. Of the 10 wackos, Hobart is the only one that's barely above 50%, and her home county didn't vote for her. She is so more vulnerable than people realize. And the money will come in from the state and the district and elsewhere to make sure as how she gets her money in. And someone needs to be able to harness that and really have this emotional win that's needed. My goal, number one, is when I get to DC, is to go join this Problem Solvers Caucus. They brought us the bipartisan infrastructure bill. I'm a huge fan of what's happened here with Restore the Balance, for those of you who know what and who are involved in it. This is how the big things are going to get done. It's really great to be fired up about a lot of these issues, but at the end of the day, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to gun safety, when it comes to immigration, there's going to have to be some type of bipartisan conversation, because no matter how well and optimistic we can do, and I am an optimist when it comes to what's going to happen in November. We're not going to have enough Democratic senators to move the ball in any type of policy that we'd all love to have up here. And I really think it's important to be super focused on being strategic about finding someone that can win and seeing Lowell Borbart sent back to Silt, and if she wants to go on Fox News, that's all fine. So I'm just going to keep on hammering away this bipartisanship. It's what's needed to win, and it's what's needed to pass any legislation of substance, given where the country is. Healthcare, Republicans get sick as well, Republicans have droughts as well, and I do believe that there are 80% of Congress actually wants to stay off television and get things done. And that's the type of person I wanted to be. I'm proud of my rural roots. I'm proud of being a great father and a successful businessman with a bunch of lumps as well, and some losses. And I'm proud to have a chance to go out there and be approachable and being a good listener. And the way you hold on to the seat, once one of us gets there, is constituent services up the wazoo, because the district has no idea what constituent services mean. And I'm that person to do that, and I'm here to ask for your vote. Thank you for that.
Thank you all. All right. I'll just close this forum. I just want to thank our candidates first and foremost for being out here. It is so hard to be a candidate and put yourself out there like that. So I just want to let you all know how much I respect you and thank you for putting yourselves out there like this. And it's so appreciated.
Thank you, Tyler.
I also just want to thank Charlie and Jolynn and Jamie because it does take a village to put these events on. So another round of applause for them.
So stand by for just a second with the candidate's indulgence for a minute. I can't let an opportunity go like this. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, I can't let an opportunity go like this without doing a little bit of party building. We're still about 20 precinct organizers short in Mesa County. We need people to step up and give us an hour a week. That's all we're asking for from a precinct organizer. We've got 7 fantastic district organizers that can help you out and can tell you what you need to do and can get me to give you your resources. We will do that. But in order to help one of these candidates defeat Lauren Boebert, this party needs to get fired up and get to work.